Hello there. Let's start with the news that has broken in the last couple of hours. The former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He has been taken to hospital after being shot while delivering a speech in the city of Nara in western Japan. He is said to be unconscious. Local media say that a sound like a gunshot was heard at the time and a male suspect has been detained. Let's bring in our correspondent Mariko Oi, who is across the story and joins us now from Singapore. At this stage, actually, we know quite a fair amount about what happened and about who has been apprehended. So just bring us up to speed, if you will.
Well, as you said, Victoria, there were two what appeared to be gunshot sounds that were heard when Mr. Abe was making a speech. Since then, as you said, a 42-year-old man who lives in Nara has been in police custody. And
about this 42-year-old man, or not a huge amount at this stage, because as you say, we are awaiting a press conference.
Indeed, that's all we know so far, but this line that he is of a former maritime self-defense force, that is quite alarming, I guess, because that means that he was trained professionally. But also some reports were saying that Mr. Abe's speech was only decided last night. So how the suspect found out about it, and this news definitely shocked many in Japan. Of course, the crime rate there is very low, and there's been almost no political violence that I can remember.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that point. I've been looking for some statistics just to give our viewers across the world a sense of how shocking this is. And I just want to point this out. In 2014, there were just 6 incidents of gun deaths in Japan, as compared to almost 34,000 in the United States in the same year. People have to undergo strict exams, don't they, including tests on their mental health in order to even buy a gun. And if you are able to purchase a gun, only shotguns and air rifles are allowed. So it just sort of goes to the heart of this point about how rare gun violence is at all in Japan, let alone political violence.
Absolutely, it is very, very rare. But when we saw some of the footage that I believe some of the bystanders filmed as Mr. Abe was shot on the street in the city of Nara, some of the footage captured the suspect being taken by the police officers, and he was holding what looked like a gun, but it looked really chunky and quite awkward. And, you know, there was a lot of speculation, you know, what that might have been. And at the moment, Nara police has been quoted by local media saying that one of the guns that he was holding was homemade. So that might explain why he managed to make it. But as you say, extremely rare and very, very shocking. So a lot of reaction, not just from all the lawmakers, from various political parties, but also from the public, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Mariko. And before we go on and hear from our correspondent in Tokyo, I just want to bring you some of the reaction that is coming in right across the world to this really quite shocking shooting of Shinzo Abe. This from the US ambassador in a statement. Abe-san has been an outstanding leader of Japan, an unwavering ally of the United States. The US government and American people are praying for the well-being of Abe-san, his family, and the people of Japan. We've had a statement also from the Prime Minister of Australia, new Prime Minister, I should say, of course, of Australia, Anthony Albanese, in a tweet saying, shocking news from Japan that the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been shot. Our thoughts are with his family and the people of Japan at this time. Taiwan, Indonesia, they keep coming, all of these different statements, people praying, sympathies expressed in the name of G20 foreign ministers as well, to the Japanese foreign minister, this from the Indonesian foreign minister. The Taiwanese president saying, I believe everyone is as surprised and sad as I am. Taiwan and Japan are both democratic countries with rule of law. On behalf of my government, I would like to severely condemn violent and illegal acts. The former Prime Minister Abe is not only a good friend of mine, but also a staunch friend of Taiwan's. He has supported Taiwan for many years and spared no effort to promote the progress of Taiwan-Japan relations. So just a a quick roundup of what has been going on. Of course, the news in the last couple of hours, Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been taken to hospital unconscious after he was shot twice whilst giving a speech in Western Japan. Local reports say that he has had and has suffered a cardiac and respiratory arrest, although we are awaiting a press conference for more details. A short time ago, I asked our Tokyo correspondent, Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, if any more details had been released about the suspect.
He served the longest term of any post-war Prime Minister, serving from 2012 until 2020. He led the country out of the huge tsunami, earthquake disaster and nuclear disaster that happened here in 2011. And he was a major world figure, bringing Japan back into things like a stronger alliance with the United States, moving Japan more away from its pacifist constitution, post-war constitution, and saying that Japan needed to be a normal country. He was known as a right-wing nationalist. He definitely does have political enemies in Japan. But he's also a huge figure in Japanese politics.
And Mr. Abe, of course, coming back in 2012 as the head of the LDP, campaigning for a boost to the Japanese economy known as AbeShinzo, and making his second term back in 2012, in the end of December 26.
That's right. So I mean, I think there were two big planks to his premiership. One was nationalism and rebuilding Japan as a normal country, as he called it. And the second was getting Japan out of its 2 decades of deflation and economic stagnation. And that is, as you say, that led to a policy called Abenomics, which was really a massive injections of spending and government liquidity from the Bank of Japan into the Japanese economy to try and get the Japanese economy out of the doldrums. It worked to an extent, certainly in the early years, 2012, 13, 14, it looked like Japan really was on the road to economic recovery. Less so in the later years. He also, he was a very, very strong proponent of the alliance with the United States. He was probably the closest foreign leader to President Donald Trump. And for that fact, I think he is seen as being, a tremendously important figure here in Japan.
And on that point, just news coming into us just now, the United States says it is saddened and shocked by the shooting of Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. This is from the US ambassador, this statement coming out in just the last few moments. It's sort of hard to understate, I guess, the importance and the significance of Shinzo Abe to international politics over many, many years.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a figure on the stage here in Japan since the 1990s, on the right, the nationalist right of Japan, and he's certainly one of the key figures in moving the ruling Liberal Democratic Party away from its sort of relationship, rebuilding relations with China, attempting to rebuild a closer relationship with Korea, and as I say, moving towards a more robust nationalist stance, rebuilding Japan's military. Under Shinzo Abe, defense budgets were put up, relations with China and South Korea deteriorated markedly, but relations with other countries, what Mr. Abe called as like-minded countries with shared values. So he saw Japan as being, as being much closer to the United States, to Britain, to Australia, and to India, what he called the family of democracies, and he wanted Japan to see its future tied to those countries. He was a key figure in launching what's called the Quad, the group of US, Japan, Australia and India, a security dialogue which we saw meeting here in Japan earlier this year. So he is, in that respect, he is a big figure in modern Japanese history. He's also a very controversial figure here in Japan because of his right-wing views and his views on the Second World War. He is considered a revisionist. He has repeatedly visited the very controversial Yasukuni Shrine here in Tokyo. He did so before his premiership, and he suspended his visits for most of his premiership, but went back again after he had stepped down. And so that raised a lot of hackles in Beijing, in Seoul, in Korea, and amongst people on the left here in Japan, because he was seen as someone who was trying to revise the version of history that the rest of the world, much of the rest of the world, saw of Japan's crimes during the Second World War.
Certainly a controversial figure, as Rupert Wingfield-Hayes is reporting there. At this stage, we do not know the condition of Shinzo Abe, the former Japanese Prime Minister. We have set up a live page for you so you can follow all the developments on this story here, including a good upsum of what we know so far, that he was shot twice, with a second shot hitting his back, which did cause him to fall to the ground. He was giving a speech for a candidate when he was attacked, and the Cabinet Secretary is describing his condition as currently unknown, although the former Prime Minister says he is in a state of cardiopulmonary arrest, which is a term that is often used before a death is officially confirmed. His attacker has now been arrested, with Japanese media describing him as a maritime officer. So plenty more available on the website, bbc.com/news. We are going to start with the news that has broken in the last couple of hours. The former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been taken to hospital after being shot while delivering a speech in the city of Nara in western Japan. He is said to be unconscious, and a male suspect has been detained. Kyodo News Agency and NHK said that Abe, who is 67 years old, appears to be in a state of cardiac arrest when he was taken into hospital after initially being conscious and responsive. Those initial reports were from the police. NHK has showed a video of Abe making an election campaign that this violent act took place during an election, the foundation of democracy. He said he condemns this act in the strongest possible terms. The Kyodo News Agency and NHK saying that Shinzo Abe, the longest-serving Prime Minister of Japan, 67 years old, appears to be in a state of cardiac and pulmonary arrest when he was taken into hospital after initially being conscious and responsive. Do stay with us here on BBC World News.
Hello, welcome to BBC World News. Let's start with the news that has broken in the last few hours. The former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been shot while delivering a speech in the street. It happened in the city of Nara in southwestern Japan. He sustained a bullet wound to the right side of his neck and is said to be unconscious. Japan's Prime Minister has said Mr. Abe is in a very grave condition. A male suspect has been detained. This report from Gareth Barlow.
It began as a typical political rally. Shinzo Abe in the city of Nara giving a stump speech for a political candidate when this happened. Shinzo Abe stood down from the post of Prime Minister in 2020, suffering from an inflammatory bowel disease that had repeatedly blighted his career. A proponent of boosting Japanese civic life, his time in office centred around boosting the ailing economy and taking a proactive stance on the world stage. While his leadership wasn't without criticism, as Prime Minister he frequently won general elections with sizable majorities, with politicians continuing to seek out his support.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has been giving a statement just in the last few minutes. We're expecting pictures and video from that coming in any minute now, but I can take you through the lines coming from what he said. He says that Shinzo Abe, the former Prime Minister, is in a grave condition. He said I am praying from my heart that Abe survives this. He said he condemns this act in the strongest. Thank you so much for joining us. It must be such a busy moment for you. What information do you have beyond what we've been hearing from the current Prime Minister?
Well, we know from Japanese media reports that the suspect said during the police investigation that he was frustrated with former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and that he shot him with the intent to kill him. This is coming from local media reports based on the investigation that's happening currently, and that the former Prime Minister Abe was shot in the neck and the back, it appears. And so right now he is in critical condition, and we're just watching to see what an official word might be with Abe, and shot him with the intent to kill him. There's not a ton about the suspect yet.
And what Shinzo Abe was doing on the street. He was giving speeches in various locations, and that is before the forthcoming upper house elections. There are reports that his schedule was published for the public to see. They knew where he would be.
all over Japan and draws a lot of attention and crowds. And so he was doing just that today, stumping for a candidate of the LDP ahead of Sunday's election. Prime Minister Kishida just said that it's not yet clear whether they are going to postpone Sunday's election. Obviously, this is such a big shock that it could be postponed, but there's also some debate right now over whether postponing it means giving more strength to this type of violence and showing that it could actually alter events in Japan. So it could actually still be held on Sunday. We'll just have to see.
And Prime Minister Kishida has said that he wants to believe that there was sufficient security, but determining that will be part of investigations. On that issue of security, this sort of violence in Japan is just almost unheard of, political violence as well as gun violence.
Yes, the last time there was a similar attack on a political official was 1992. So, in the face of Japan, we all recall him as an American meeting with President Trump and really trying to hold the U.S.-Japan alliance together when President Trump at the time really tested it. And Abe, he comes from a political family. He worked really hard to improve Japan's economy, which obviously is a really big deal because of the stagnant economy. He wanted to improve Japan's defense. And even after leaving office, he started debates over whether Japan is adequately defending itself and actually continued to affect national politics even after stepping down as prime minister.
Michelle, thank you. We will wait to hear any more updates, and we really appreciate you taking time to talk to us, especially in such a busy moment for you there. Washington Post Bureau Chief there in Tokyo, Michelle Lee. Just one line to bring you from the reaction that's been coming from all over the world. We've been hearing in the last hour or so from various leaders. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying he is utterly appalled and saddened to hear about the despicable attack on Japan's Shinzo Abe. He said on Twitter, "My thoughts are with his family and loved ones." Hello, welcome to BBC World News. The breaking news in the last few hours, the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is in a grave condition in hospital after being shot at a campaign event. Eyewitness reports say Mr. Abe was shot twice from behind while giving a speech in the street. The current Prime Minister of Japan called it an act of brutality and said everything that can be done is being done to revive him. It happened in the city of Nara in southwestern Japan. A male suspect has been detained. This report from Gareth Barlow.
It began as a typical political rally. Shinzo Abe in the city of Nara giving a stump speech for a political candidate when this happened.